and then we'll head, there it is. Well, good afternoon, good evening, bienvenidos, everyone. Here in the United States, it is Mother's Day, so I want to give a big shout out to all the ways that all the genders nurture in this world. And also, I learned an incredible tidbit from Kim. Tipped me off to this wonderful, it's not a podcast, but a Heather Cox Richardson writing about Mother's Day. I'm sure that you read this, Kim, today, this morning, maybe not. You know, Mother's Day here in the States was not the holiday that you all that we're all accustomed to, did not originate as the holiday that we are accustomed to, as we, particularly as we see it in social media. Mother's Day emerged after the Civil War, and it was an early burgeoning of the suffrage movement to encourage peace after the Civil War and to stop the carnage that war generates. Well, obviously, I think that we can utilize that ethos here today, unfortunately, in the 21st century, with what we see going on around us in the world. And so I bring that ethos of Mother's Day into our Zoom room, as well as the traditional one, and hope that all of you are enjoying your day today, however you choose to be honored or honor. Well, we're going to honor some fantastic writers who will be featuring their new books today. We'll be hearing from Neil Young, Karen Warinsky, Marjorie Maddox, in collaboration with her daughter, Anna Lee Hafer, and a doppelganger of someone named Sandy Yannone will be reading as well. Again, welcome. You've joined Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. I'm your host for today, Sandy Yannone. I'm so thrilled to be here. My mom has just joined the room behind me here, sitting in her front row seat for the program. And yeah, and we will be enjoying this program this afternoon here in Connecticut with all of you here live in our Zoom studio, as well as those of you watching on Facebook. A very good afternoon, evening, morning to you. And of course, to those of you who are watching this in recording, we're always so appreciative for the many ways that folks can access our program. And that is due to, of course, the amazing work of Don Krieger and Kim Ports Parsons. Well, folks, today it's our new book showcase. And I will also add that our Poets Focus last week on form was just stellar and just top-notch, a masterclass in writing form. So thanks to all of you who came out and participated in that program as we head on through the month of May. It's our penultimate month before we go on summer hiatus. So do be sure that you join us in these final episodes before we take our summer break. Well, today it's our new book showcase, and I've been like ecstatic about this for just months, watching how it was coming together, and very excited to be part of the constellation today. I'm quite honored to be able to be part of the reading today myself. And we start at the top of the program today with a poet who is doing such incredible work in the world as a writer, but also as a poetry citizen. extraordinaire as one of the founders and collaborators with Drunken Muse Press out of Scotland. And that is the one and only Neil Young. Well, Neil Young hails from West Belfast and now lives, as I mentioned, in Northeast Scotland. He worked as a laborer, a kitchen porter, a stage hand, a barman, and studied drama before becoming a journalist. And, I'll just ad lib that there are a number of poets who are journalists in the world. And I think it's a vital pairing. It's turned into a vital pairing as we've continued to move through the decades. So I always perk up my ears quite a bit when I hear that a poet has a background as a journalist, because I know that they're bringing something of themselves through the lens of their experience of writing about the world. Well, Neil's publications include Lagan Voices from Scripa 2011, The Parting Glass, 14 Sonnets, Tap Saltiri from 2016, Jimmy Cagney's Long Lost Kid Half Brother from Blacklight Engine Room 2017, Shrapnel from Poetry Salzburg 2019, and After the Riot from Nine Pens in 2021. Neil is the founder of the Poets Republic magazine. The We Gaithrin, I'm probably mispronouncing that, my apologies. Festival, and the co-founder, as I mentioned before, of the very power-filled and necessary Drunk Muse Press. His new poetry collection, which is due out a little later this summer, so we're getting a beautiful preview here, is The Song She Didn't Sing. Would you please welcome Neil Young?
Hi, hello. Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Sandy. I feel underdressed after that, and I should have put my velvet writer's jacket on, but that was lovely. Thank you. As you can see from the background here, I'm in Northeast Scotland because I'm looking at you and there's all sunlight in your rooms, but obviously I'm in the bleak western part of Northwest Europe, and so we don't get a lot of sunlight up here, and we don't like sunlight anyway. Um, um, Before the inevitable descent of any poetry reading into relentless misery and fatalism about the human condition, I thought I'd read something moderately upbeat about my from my forthcoming collection. This is called Crystal Ball Gazing About My Daughter. She will be wise and not get drunk like her father. Or if she does, sometimes she'll avoid the gutter. Her liver will roar and scarred into old age. She will be brazen, so no one can say she squandered the better part of youthful gifts on self-doubt. She'll be as flinty as she is kind, and never forget that hatred of warmongers, sleazy bastards, and money is intrinsic to good health. She will be a dog person, savior of sparrows from cats. She'll find the last copy of my sonnets under a dusty sock that got jammed between a radiator and skirting board, and hold that volume aloft like a rare edition, which unfortunately it is. If or when she breaks a heart, it will be by accident, or because she would not forfeit any part of herself. She may break mine, but that is okay. It means she stayed in touch. And it's a descent now. So It's a descent into gloom and death. I don't actually know what 15 minutes is. I usually just wing it, 4 or 5 poems, So please just somebody put a red flag up or reach out with a comic hook whenever I get near to 15 minutes. Where are we? 2010, maybe about another 10 minutes. Anyway, this is called Salute. And this is a poem from the forthcoming collection, The Song She Didn't Sing. And it's really a recollection of somebody who had vanished, well, not quite vanished from my memory, that I'd known when I was a teenager. But you know how it is sometimes somebody pops up for some reason, comes back, filters into the front of your consciousness. And you think back and you have an awareness that actually, this person had, for the small time you knew them, quite a significant influence on you, even though you maybe didn't know it at the time. This is a fairly short poem about one of those persons. It's called Salute. And it's about just a little tribute to a woman called Janet. Blue-streaked mohawk when the world was monochrome, chased out of her Saturday job at the Woolworths record counter in 1982 for playing War by Edwin Starr at full volume as Thatcher brayed her victory over Argentinian dead. Janet swiveled a V salute at the shop floor manager and in her impromptu exit declared a life uncensored and unafraid. We next snakebite in the graveyard that afternoon, and she could be drinking snakebite now for all I know 4 decades later, as I've no idea if Janet's alive or dead. But send my thanks to someone who, in her everyday acts, transcended the ordinary. In a world where only the obliging got paid, she flipped 2 fuck you fingers for humanity. The the collection that's due to be published in August, the song She Didn't Sing, takes really its leitmotif from an incident that happened in 1926 at the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. And it expands on that because a lot of the poems feed on it. At the time, Sean O'Casey, his play The Plough and the Stars was staged at the Abbey, and what he presented on stage provoked a riot. So, and it was because he was depicting, the squalid reality of the way that people lived. He put it on stage, and that was very starkly contrasted with the mythology that the new state was trying to cloak itself in to camouflage the violence of its history. And that is one of the themes that constantly recurs in this collection. It's the way that states, governments, countries, nations, communities, people create and mystify their history. They create this mythology around their history, whether it's the United States, Britain, Ireland, Scotland, wherever it is, to try to camouflage or repackage and sanitize the violence of their past. And so the poems are really looking at things from an angle that is at odds and in conflict with that. And I discovered from that that this particular incident and one character in the play was particularly pertinent. Anyway, before I use up all my time, I'll read 2 poems which are about that. The first one is called A Song for Rosie Redmond. On the background CD, Sinead is singing a nation's favorite martyrology anthem. It's foggy dew time again. Easter bloodshed's tuneful on her tongue, that sticky stuff of killing and dying, turns misty as rebellion's song, although this too is drunken potion, a people's glug for self-delusion as thick as rule Britannia at the proms. I'm thinking of Rosie Redmond in Sean O'Casey's Plough and the Stars. Rosie lounging in a Dublin pub, bemoaning this rebellion that robs her of clients and she the brothel rent to pay, while Pierce declares that the window beyond bloodshed is a cleansing and a sanctifying thing, and the nation that regards it as the final horror has lost its manhood. Before this drama's done, he'll get his wish, ascend to godlike otherness of history books, while Rosie soon will die for sure of malnutrition, TB, a beating, or syphilis, but not before she's been howled into the shadows. The audience rioted. The club of martyrs' widows scorned the filthy spectacle of her humanity. I wonder who will sing of Rosie Redmond through this fog. Christy Moore, the Dubliners, Sinead, not one. No song for those whose squalor distempers a nation's crystal myth. She's character in this drama, yet when she looks back from the window, her stark eyes tell more of bloody sacrifice than any martyr or hero's song. There's an accompanying poem uh, to which elaborates on the themes of the suppression and censorship of these unruly, riotous, really authentic working class voices, in that although the play provoked a riot, it during rehearsals there was a song that Rosie was due to sing, which the Abbey Theatre decided had to be removed. So the play provoked a riot without this song that she was going to sing anyway. The idea was that the song was going to cause so much moral outrage, but it's rumored that a text of the song still exists somewhere, but nobody really knows, which is, I find, really quite interesting. Anyway, the song she didn't sing. Somewhere in the cupboards of the Abbey Theatre, where no one's allowed to look or no one any longer can trace, Rosie's song persists in punched typewriter print. It didn't survive the play's rehearsals. The Abbey board, spooked by the sex of it, dancing a jig in the bed, excised this slum girl obscenity. And decades later, the actress Ria Mooney, first ever Rosie, couldn't even recall the tune. Interviewed, she scraped her memory, and the most she could summon sounded like Doggy in the Window. Oh, Rosie, how you might have lit a revolution beyond their quarantine. Center stage, both mocking and bewildered, humanity stripped to the tit. The risen righteous of this new state chased you like gusted dirt back to the squat lanes where you couldn't taint their picture book Celticism. Censored, mobbed, your presence too brazen, and still this century later unsung. Oh. How are we doing for time? One more? Two more?
Yeah, let's do one more. Are you okay with one more?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's
Okay.
just this what? I'll do this is usually in the room behind me there's a large rug, which was a rug that was given to me and my wife on our wedding anniversary, our wedding, by a surgeon friend of mine. And the rug was created by a man called Mahmoud Al Sawaf, who is the last weaver of Gaza City. I know a lot of poets want to write about the what's happening in Gaza now, And I'm very much of the view that we should write about what we know, but that actually with the domesticity of this, and because the Palestinians can write their own poetry better than they can speak for themselves. But the domesticity of this in my world, detached from there, and the reminder that prompted this poem. It's called Weaving. On the floor of my home office stretches out the dark and cornflower blue of a rug with interlocking crenellated patterns. It occupied the living room of our last flat, then moved to the hallway at this one before I rolled it up, then rolled it out beneath my desk and chair. This carpet that has been loved and stepped across indifferently, both, by guests in socks who'd never guess its provenance, and in my hurried barefoot day's routine. It was the unlikely gift at our wedding more than 10 years ago, the present of a surgeon friend for whom bed linen, a deluxe toaster, or wine club voucher wouldn't do. I gaze now from news headlines to the perfection of its weave that I'd so often overlooked or failed to recognize. This carpet that in those years gone was made by Mahmoud al-Sawaf, Sawaf, the last weaver of Gaza City, whose craft was close to vanishing even then, as all he knew was squeezed by aging fingers and siege that left the wool redundant at his loom. Now this dark carpet is memory more vital than my own. Its artifact, story, language, history, proof of man and name, when workshop, loom, and people are burnt to ash and bone. Thank you.
Wow, that is the one, the only Neil Young. I say the one and only, but I think of you that way. But there's some other people that might think of a different Neil Young, but not me. But not me.
Thank you.
I'm going on record. I want the book, the new book, the new collection due out in August is The Song She Didn't Sing. Folks, we have been gifted a preview with not only the title poem, but some of the poems in the collection. And what I want to say about what I am appreciating already about what I'm hearing from this collection, certainly unmistakably, undeniably, its musicality, but also it's, dare I say, weaving of history and humanity, and the contemporary humanity. And I think that makes for that connection, that bridge makes for the most compelling and necessary poetry in contemporary times, in my humble opinion. So thank you so much for providing that in your new collection. And we'll look forward to that in August, folks, with Neil Young. Thank you so much, Neil. And also, again, I want to give a big shout out to the work at Drunk Muse Press. If you have not looked at their catalog recently, do, because the poets that they are publishing are some of the most needed voices in our times. And I thought a lot about what I was going to say today in terms of this. I think that your press is one of the most significant presses in the world publishing right now. So thank you so much, Neil.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me and giving me the chance to read. And thanks for that promotion for Drunk News Press. We're
And
doing the best we can with very limited resources,
I,
but
I'm
you know,
I'm aware of that, and all the more reason to for each of us to do what we can to lift each other up. That's kind of, I'll keep doing what I can because I have your titles some of the titles here, and as I said, I think they're some of the most important contemporary voices that we need right now. And some of it, unfortunately, some of it because of some of the material, some of it, unfortunately, and yet we have it because of the good, like of the dedicated work of you and Hugh and Jessamine. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, this is a joy for me now to shift to a different way of thinking of contemporary times. And that is one of my contemporaries now in the state of Connecticut, where I now reside, even though we haven't met in person yet, which I certainly look forward to. I've been so pleased to learn about Karen's poetry citizenship here in the state of Connecticut, which, for those of you who might not be familiar with this small state that we reside in, it's part of New England, and New England, of course, is a constellation of states so there's a there's a pretty deep ripple throughout New England. If you're in any of the New England states, your reach goes quite far. And you can't always say that about like the state of Washington where I used to live. Like, but particularly before Zoom, like if you were a Washington poet, unless had, some amazing publicist or had reached some kind of mythical stature that sadly very few of us meet, because of the way capitalism and things like that work. But in Connecticut, you have the reach to the other states, the tri-state area and everything. And Karen was one of the first names that I encountered, like doing the work of putting reading series together and promoting other poets, while doing her own work. So first of all, just my kudos to you, Karen, for the work that you do in all the communities in which you're involved in, and also for your own just wonderful voice. I've heard your poetry, and so it's always beautiful when, when the poet is holding up their own good work with their own good work. And that's how I think of you. Well, Karen Warinsky began publishing poetry in 2011 and was named as a finalist in the Montreal International Poetry Contest in 2013. Her work appears in several anthologies, including Nuclear Impact, Broken Atoms in Our Hands, the 2019 Mizmor Anthology, and literary magazines of note, including Blue Heron, Circumference, and Consilience. She is a 2023 Best of the Net nominee, and her books are Gold in Autumn 2020, Sunrise Ruby in 2022, and both are from Human Error Publishing, and Dining with War 2023 from Alien Buddha Press. I love Alien. Warinsky coordinates poetry readings under the name Poets at Large in Connecticut and Massachusetts. But as I mentioned, the reach goes quite further than those two states. And it is such a joy and pleasure for me to be able to welcome you to the program for your new book showcase.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. And again, we still haven't met in person, but I know it's coming up. And I am glad you came back from Ireland. I was wondering what was happening. I'm going to read a little bit from Sunrise Ruby and Dining with War. I'm going to concentrate on this book. This is a heavy book, kind of in keeping with some of what Mr. Young just read. And then I do have a piece on Gaza, and I'm going to end with some hopeful poems because I like to end with hope. I do think we have hope in the world. The idea for this book, Dining with War, which is doing pretty well on Amazon, I will say, came from the realization that after my children grew up and left the house, my husband and I started taking supper in front of the television with our plates of food. And it occurred to me one day that this is probably not a good thing to do. And I wondered about how callous I had become, possibly from being able to eat in front of all of these horrors that are shown on television. And it just made me realize other times in real life where a fray happened at a meal, and some things are humorous that happen at dinner time, but they involve maybe a fight. And it just kind of strung everything together. So I'm going to start. I probably won't introduce each piece very, intensely, but this very first one, I think people of my age, which is mid baby boom, you will understand this very easily. And it's called Supper with Cronkite. Just the three of us on weekdays, suppers were casual. Dad somewhere on the road selling insurance to the worried and the cautious. And Mom would swing the TV around into the kitchen, its casters creaking on linoleum, and we would dine with the monkeys or Bewitched. Some nights she put on the news. That's where the normalcy began, the normalcy of dining with war. I watched soldiers burn Vietnamese villages, people crouching together, afraid, saw soldiers bloody, broken, loaded onto helicopters, listened to the body count as I chewed on my hamburger, sipped my iced tea, ate my vegetables, listened to the most trusted man in America explain the situation while waiting for my chocolate pudding. I grew up in a small ranch house in a neighborhood full of similar houses in a little Midwestern town in Northern Illinois. And not to blame the Midwest for the situation, but it was a working class town. There were a lot of poor people, a fair amount of strife. And this memory comes from that time. It's called Bee in the Yard. Out of the service, but still at war, he liked to fight battles he could win. Often those were with his wife. There were many rules she needed to follow, and she would repeat them in her head so as not to forget. And the other moms heard the slamming doors, observed the drawn shades, the car that sat in the driveway for days, and knew that the consequences were severe when this husband was unhappy. There were many rules about their daughter, a girl a little younger than me, my next door neighbor for 2 years. She had to play in their yard, and only one friend at a time could come over to also play in the yard, not go into the above ground pool, and never go into the green split level home for any reason, like to get a drink of water or use the bathroom. And the girl could never go to any of our houses. And when he came home at noon for lunch and at 5 p.m. for supper, she and his wife needed to be there, neat and tidy and ready to serve. If you are like, okay, we'll do a humorous one first. Back in 1981, early 80s, I actually lived in Seattle, Washington, and I didn't make a lot of money. I was a public relations person at an arts college, a nonprofit arts college. I didn't make a lot of money, but back then, $30 was a lot, and you could go out to a nice place to eat for $30. So this piece is called $30 Date 1981. Newly single and tentative, my girlfriend said I should go out, invited me to her party. 20-somethings filled her rented house, nestling in corners, lounging on tables and countertops, some cross-legged on the floor, and it felt like college days. Everyone was friendly, the conversation stimulating. I felt at home. Bob, her roommate, called me a few days later. Would you like to go to supper? Why, yes, I would, I said, my confidence coming back inside, a cat in from the cold, and I planned what to wear, how to fix my hair. He asked me to meet him, at an exclusive restaurant in Belltown where I never dined, salad days too real. After the meal, he leaned forward across the table, whispered, "Looks like I forgot my wallet." So I wrote a check for $30 because I didn't have the cash, my checkbook on me by chance. Still being polite, not yet toughened into a broad who could deal, I let him come up to my apartment to chat. When he tried to make out, stuck his tongue in my ear, I told him good night and sent him home. That's a retreat, right? Keeping in theme with our war poem. So that one was funny. If you're like me, you might watch the PBS Evening News, and so you will know who Judy Woodruff is. She was a longtime anchor on that news program. She's just now retired, but she's doing reporting still. And this is called Judy Woodruff Makes It Palatable. Some nights, I can almost forget what I'm doing as I put the fork to my lips, take a bite, taste whatever deliciousness there is in our cooking. Our family room is comfortable. We have new carpet, a wood stove, two well-upholstered sofas, a built-in bookcase. Now that the kids are gone, we take our evening meal there, each on a couch, glass of wine, glass of beer, while the dulcet tones of fair Judy Woodruff soothe us as we swallow, while Syria and Ukraine are blown up. Citizens in Myanmar are beaten with clubs, and Hong Kong protesters are chased from the streets, bloody and bruised. Judy is implacable, petite, blonde, preserved, reserved, and she helps us stay just numb enough to get the food down, not make a fuss, not really need to leave the room whenever she warns us. This content might make some viewers uncomfortable. That was first published in the Lothlorien Journal, and I should also say that Bee in the Yard was first published in the Rye Whiskey Review, and I forgot to mention that. I want to read this next one to you, and it comes from personal experience of an early relationship that I had with a man, and it's called Family Feud. Before realizing he had emotional problems, I thought his sister was the crazy one. We'd visit his mother's on weekends. Sometimes after supper, his mother and sister would get into it. This feud started years before between those two women who couldn't make peace with Eileen's wild teenage past, his mother resentfully raising two grandbabies, Eileen angry that all her running only led back to that tiny house. One night, someone called the cops. The screaming was so loud. When the police arrived, I took the children into the bedroom, Eileen's elfin pretty girl and her sweet funny boy. I closed the door, held them close, and the girl looked up into my face with her chocolate cookie eyes, patted my arm, and said, "Don't worry, they do this all the time." That was also, oh, I'm sorry, that was not first published, but that's Family Feud. This next one was first published in Misaligned Anthology, which is an anthology about coming of age stories. And it's called Snapshots of Your War. Evenings, we'd cook meager meals together in your apartment. That was the year I learned to eat liver because you liked it and we could buy a pound for 80 cents. And I loved you. After supper, we'd study, sometimes hang out with friends and watch a show, or sit on the porch and watch the street. Go to bed, make love, get up, make love again, sometimes sit up and talk. One night, you handed me an envelope. Inside were 5 small, muddy-colored pictures, dead bodies floating in a murky brown river. You said it was somewhere outside Saigon on an inlet leading to the South China Sea. This instamatic evidence, your memory of these waterlogged bodies, now mine. You were impassive that night, showing me this horror, but tough war stories and your shield of scars couldn't protect the soft bread of you still waiting inside for the right moment to crumble. As mentioned, we have quite a history with war around the world and in our own country. And this is something that if I ever learned it in high school, I had forgotten it, but I refreshed my memory about the Civil War, and this piece comes from that, and it's called Picnic Battle, 1861. The recruits and volunteers for Lincoln's army thought the conflict would be swiftly decided. Just before that July Sunday in 1861, dozens of Washingtonians drove their carriages, rode their horses 7 hours to Virginia, outside Manassas, to see the fight. Enterprising saleswomen sold pies and other edibles, feeding curious, hungry onlookers, while others brought their own picnic baskets, took out opera glasses to get a better view of the slaughter. Nearly 5,000 citizens lost their lives at Bull Run, former home of Algonquin speakers. First battle of our Civil War, a war that keeps returning from the dead. And I will read one more from Dining with War. And I had a lovely Mother's Day today. My two daughters came to visit me. My son went to see his mother-in-law, and we went for a walk together, had a nice time. They brought me cupcakes. I had a wonderful time. But when they were growing up, sometimes Mother's Day wasn't so great. And this is a memory from one of those days, and it's called Mother's Day. Right before going back to work full time, the budget was still tight and another Mother's Day rolled around. But we decided to spend some money, have lunch at the Purple Cat, get out of town, take a break from making meals and dishes. Let me feel special for 60 minutes. Crammed into a large booth, we five sat, ordered, everyone fidgeting without enough room, legs bumping under the table, restless rustling and childish complaints, putting everyone on edge. And I don't know how it started or what was said, but there was some battle with one of you over something. And the pictures show us dressed in our best, hair combed and curled, the meal laid on the table, but I'm not smiling on this, my special day. It was just another skirmish in the struggle to raise children, and as I recall, I lost that one. Okay, I see I have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to switch gears. And before I end with my hopeful poem, I do want to read this piece. I have been writing about Gaza since November, and this was published earlier this month in the New Verse News. And I don't know if any of you follow this woman. She's a young woman journalist, a Palestinian. Her name is Bisan Auda. And I stumbled upon her on Facebook and I wrote this poem, and it's called Searching. I type "is Bisan" in the search bar, and the next two words appear automatically with their furtive question mark. Still alive? Bisan, a Palestinian journalist, popped into my Facebook feed one morning during this latest Mideast roil. Her fresh, round face full of promise, her troubled brown eyes alert, as she posted cell phone videos of the wreckage of Palestine, the slaughter of the people. The videos are raw, wound the eyes, sear the soul. She posts each time she must flee, relocate. So many now she's lost count. One day, she shows us her favorite flower, passionate poppy, Hanun, red, alive, pushing forth in the spring air. Another day, she shows a small boy selling homemade potato chips. Delicious, tasty, she says, almost smiling. Boys flying kites on the beach behind her. These moments are her sustenance as she shares pictures of her home in the Gaza ruins, a video of the day a bomb at Al Shifa Hospital just missed her by 2 minutes, her refugee life in Rafah, stories of others spit out by this war, hundreds of thousands with no safe place to go, their way home stalled like the peace talks. Bisan is 27. She is forthright, emotional, outraged, bewildered. She wonders, where is help? Why is this allowed to go on 7 months now? She looks into the phone's lens, begs, don't get used to what is happening in Gaza. She is searching for rationality, assistance. I will keep searching for her. Pray she can send more videos of children flying their kites, sending up wishes. Pray those wishes get answered. I see I've kind of gone over my time, Sandy. Do you have one more minute for me?
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Okay, because I hate to end on such a serious note. I do write about hopeful things too. That's a lot of what's in this book, Sunrise Ruby from Human Era Publishing. And let me end with this, because hope is what we have to hang on to. Hope in each other. It's called Stone and Bone. Letting go, just being, I feel for the center, often find it. Neutrality moves me from the daily chaos, and I observe, dispassionate, calm, though sometimes I still yell at the TV, get pulled down into a dense fog. Connection obvious. We affect each other in cars, rooms, countries, cells touching cells on the earth, spinning in the galaxy, inside the universe, nestled within the heart of the creator. Yet the space between cells, between objects, between the particle and the wave is vast, and much exists there in the counter space, floating potential, where new choices can be made, new outcomes manifest. And the stones and bones of our ancestors, unearthed by time and devoted archaeologists, remind us life will go on. What will you do to shape it? Thank you for listening.
My mom says she is a good poet. She is very.
Thanks, Mom.
My
I
mom,
appreciate
my
that.
mom will probably be meeting you too in person.
Oh, I hope so. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Everybody, that is Karen Warinsky. The book is Dining with War from Alien Buddha Press. And, it's so interesting because, I have those experiences too of and memories of, sitting in front of the TV and what's washing over me and what's taking hold and how am I finding ways to find hope, not just in the current time, but back when I was, when I remember CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite, and of course, Judy Woodruff, now in, doing her work. So yeah, I think that the confluence of how you bring the consciousness of war to us is very palpable. And it just resonated so much with me. I think it's a very powerful lens through which to kind of cast all these different images and stories. And dare I say, um messages for how we must continue to work to heal and find hope in in this devastating time.
And keep our humanity and understand that everything is so packaged now that, like what Bisan says, don't let this become normal. This is
Right.
not this can't be the new normal. And we have to fight with everything we have against what we see in the media, and analyze it and process it correctly, and look for hope in nature and friendship. And there's a lot of good in life. But yeah, it's so packaged. And when I found myself eating in front of it and realized, oh my gosh, it's not a movie. This is real.
Right.
And what am I doing? What does that say about me? You know, so I got a little alarmed.
I so appreciate it's such a power-filled way to to bring those messages back to us. And I guess I'll use your word, to repackage them, right? So that we remember that they're not just things that are washing over us. They're real lives, real situations, and what can we do in our individual spheres of humanity to counterbalance that which we see and hear. Thank you again. Again, the book is Dining with War from Alien Buddha Press. Well, I'm going to move us along for our next two featured artists, I'll say artists, poet and visual artist and everything in between. It's amazing that today, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, the historical underpinnings of Mother's Day and what we understand contemporarily, it's so special to have a mother-daughter combination, collaborators, in all, in all that is artistry, join us on the program. And it's no mistake. Kim's a genius and she knew what she was doing. She said, let's bring these two together on Mother's Day. It'll be beautiful. And it will be. And I'm so looking forward. I have been mesmerized, moved, and just all together taken by Marjorie Maddox's poetry over the years that I've had the pleasure to be hearing her in the seat that I have here on Cultivating Voices. And so today, to be able to welcome Anna Lee to join her in showcasing her new book is just such a wonderful experience. And I'm just grateful that we're able to showcase the two of you, your work in the way that you hope to showcase it. Well, let me share the two bios so that we get to their work. Marjorie Maddox is a professor of English and creative writing at Lock Haven University. And if you've been paying attention on Facebook, you excuse me, will note that she just hit a pretty major milestone. So congratulations. She is a 2023 Monson Arts Fellow, a poetry editor of Presence, and a radio host of WPSU's Poetry Moment. Marjorie has published numerous collections of poetry, including Transplant, Transport, Transubstantiation, and her ekphrastic collaboration with photographer Karen Elias, Heart Speaks, is spoken for from Shanty Arts Publishing. Begin with a Question is from Paraclete Press, and she has many, many more collections to her amazing credit. Today, we are so pleased to be showcasing the collaborative collection in the Museum of My Daughter's Mind, which is also from Shanty Arts. Marjorie's published hundreds of poems in magazines and anthologies, and she's received myriad awards and honors, including the Foley Poetry Prize and Cornell University's Chasen Award. She's an editor, an essayist, workshop leader, children's author, and just all things poetry, the best poetry citizen you can imagine. Beautiful. And I'm so looking forward to this, as we also welcome Anna Lee Hafer, who is a studio artist based in the Philadelphia area, whose work is heavily influenced by the surrealist painters such as Rene Magritte, Salvador Dali, and Pablo Picasso. Hafer uses multiple layers of paint to create dimension and texture. Anna Lee graduated from Roberts Wesleyan College in Rochester, New York in 2019 with a Bachelor of Science in Fine Art. She relocated to the Philadelphia area in pursuit of a graduate degree at Temple University and a career in studio art. Anna Lee has had work included at Davison Art Gallery and Rochester Contemporary Art Center, and has worked as a painting instructor, a child art instructor, as well as a private art instructor. It's so amazing. I'm so looking forward to what we are about to witness and experience from the two of you, Marjorie Maddox and Anna Lee Hafer. Thank you so much for coming to the program today.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much for having us, and especially on Mother's Day. And this book actually came out last Mother's Day, so it seems just very fitting. We're going to have a kind of conversation about the book, going back and forth about our process, about the art, and about the poetry. And so I'm going to share my screen so you can see the images at the same time as we're having this conversation. Okay, so this book had several beginnings, and the first one was that Anna Lee and I in 2018 decided that we were going to go drive from Pennsylvania to see an art exhibit at the American Visual Art Museum in Baltimore, which was just fantastic and a real kind of bonding experience, a real way for us to find that connection between poet and artist. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So this is the cover. This picture is also in our living room. Well, actually, right now it's at an art exhibit in Wellsboro, which Anna Lee opened with yesterday. And so we had the joy of it. It's really been a weekend of celebration. So it's amazing art exhibit, which will last all of this month. But I was really drawn to Anna Lee's work. Well, maybe I should say the second beginning for this book was I was teaching writing about art in my creative writing class. And just on a whim, I showed my students Anna Lee's webpage, which is www.hafer.work. And the students were just captivated by her work. So several of them started writing poems about her work from her webpage. And I thought, well, I should do this too. And pretty soon, after a while, I had like 18 paintings about Anna Lee's work. So I had this series of paintings from the American Visual Art Museum with artists such as Greg Mort, Margaret Munschlash, and also my colleague and collaborator, Karen Elias, and then this whole series on Anna Lee's work. And I was really drawn, besides the fact that Anna Lee's my daughter, just by the way that she weaves words in. I mean, what poet is not going to be intrigued by that? And the way that there are all these different perspectives. The more closely you look at her paintings, the more you discover. So, you know, at first this looks like a library room, and then all of a sudden the library is on top of a building, and then there's another chair looking out. So maybe we could start by Anna Lee, if you want to talk a little bit about this particular painting.
Yeah, so I can just kind of describe my thought process. So as we kind of go along, you'll see that there's similar themes in my artwork. But one of the things that I really like a lot is chess, because every time you play chess, it's a different game. And so I think that in itself is very surreal, because even though you're technically playing the same game, you're not. And there's a level of intelligence that comes with chess too, that I think is very interesting too, and strategy. So I really pick up on those kind of themes in my work. Something that I decided to do in this particular painting was place 2 chairs. So I really wanted you as a viewer to decide which chair you wanted to sit in, and maybe that leads to another place. We're just not sure yet. That's kind of up to your imagination.
And then here are some close-ups. That's one of the nice things about Zoom, is you can really kind of see these close-ups, so you can see some of the words and again some of the angles. Don't go this way. There's a lot of arrows and Again, different perspectives in her work. And I'm not going to read this particular poem, but the way that I kind of got into her work, away into the paintings, particularly because some of them are quite abstract, was to use her artist statements. So I would look at these, I would look at the painting. I think ekphrastic work is not just summarizing, but you're really entering into the experience. And then I used a lot of fixed forms in this poem. So here I have a pantoum where you alternate the first and third and second and fourth lines. And I would take words and phrases. I'm pointing at my screen as if you can see this, but I would take words and phrases that were directly from her artist statement and put them in italics, or words and phrases that appeared in the painting. So those were kind of repeated throughout. And these pantoum and villanelles seem particularly effective in this book when I was dealing with the paintings. So you can kind of see how I'm doing that. And then here's the painting in our living room with Annalee. This is one of the paintings that was at the American Visual Art Museum in Baltimore. And one of the reasons that we decided to go there, because we were really captivated by this artist, Margaret Munch-Lash. You'll see this little girl who it was actually her daughter, and she's, grown up now. And at first it seems a very kind of innocent, calm, nice photo. But if you look more closely, you see that this little girl is entirely made up of bees. And I think this is also one of the themes that comes out of Annalee's work, and in maybe my work as well, things that seem calm and good and they're kind of deceptively simple on the surface. When you look more closely, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of activity. There's maybe the threat of danger. So I think that's one of the reasons that we really connected with this particular exhibit. Here are a few of the other things. This little girl in the corner, another one of Margaret's pieces. She's entirely made up of maggots when you look more closely. Here's Greg Mort's work. The idea of kind of looking out into the imagination and space. He has work in the White House, does a lot of stuff with astronomy. Antarmikos, this is a permanent display, which reminded me of the inside of a heart and my father's own unsuccessful heart transplant. Ingo Swan is a psychic, and you can see some of those was a psychic and an artist. Here's some of Karen's work. And this sculpture of Edgar Allan Poe is made up entirely of peeps, those marshmallow chicks. So I found that really interesting. So these are some of the pieces I wrote on, and that one. This piece, Annalee, I think ties in with this image of how people view you, how you gain your own identity. And we're going to read this one together. And then Annalee can talk about the painting. Bare minimum. Beneath whitewash, sternum, neck, skull, the fog of face, the residue of dream released to scream or freedom.
No comment.
Unclothed of skin and woven expectations, bone stacks on bone, exposes the core of caustic commentary. What we see is beneath the said.
No comment.
Is not the bared, but the unbearable.
Here I am.
Of society's design on us.
I am.
Breathing bare.
Here.
And Annalee, do you want to talk a little bit about the painting?
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about the process. I like to tell a little bit about this painting because sometimes a lot of accidents in art actually turn out to be good things instead of bad things. And maybe you guys have similar experiences in poetry and writing as well. I'm sure you do. So this piece was a piece I made when I lived in Philadelphia. We had a rooftop kind of like deck situation. I would paint up there. It was really nice because I could look down and see the whole city. This piece I was trying to do originally a head, and a figure. And I just felt like it was very basic, cliche. Something I've seen a million times before. So I was trying to do something a little different. And eventually I kind of played around with it a little bit. And then I just ended up spray painting over the head because I felt like it was a very big juxtaposition. This was a painting that I had left out to dry. And I got a call when I was at work that one of my roommates had accidentally knocked over some paint and it spilled on my painting. And they were very upset. And I said, no, don't worry. Let me take a look at it when I get home. So when I got home and I took a look at it, that's what all these brown dots that you're seeing in the left-hand corner kind of spanning down. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? I actually like it better now. She did something to it that it was missing something until that paint spilled and all those brown splatter marks. So I like to tell that story because sometimes when accidents happen, never freak out because sometimes it's good. Sometimes it teaches you something new. So that's just a little bit about that.
And when I looked at this painting, the underneath the whitewash part, I don't know if you can see it, and I don't even know if Annalie could see it, but to me it looked like a skull with someone screaming. And I'll show you right here, I saw the kind of the skull and an open mouth. And so that kind of came into the poem as I was writing. Our process was I would write the poem using her website, using the artist statements, and then I would send her the poem and see if it was in the ballpark, because I didn't want to do something that was completely off of what she was trying to get at. And then we talk about it a little bit and she'd give me some more information. But usually, right, Annalie, usually it was pretty.
I think for the most part, she got it right away. And she asked me a few questions about a couple pieces, but you know, the concept was there from the beginning.
So that was helpful to kind of talk back and forth. Do you want to talk about this painting, Annalie?
Sure. So this one has all my paintings have backstories to them. Mostly from just like small little moments in my life, even if it was just like 3 seconds to a minute or even a whole year. This piece was a piece that I was working on at the time when I was teaching to young girls at they were about 5 and 6, I would say. And I had this painting hanging in my stairwell, and I had invited them and their mother over for dinner one night. So they came over to my house to have dinner, and I think we made s'mores outside. But this painting was hanging in my stairwell at the time, and one of the girls, her name was Mary, and I believe she was about 6 at the time, looked at this painting and said, that looks like smoke. And from that moment on, I couldn't see it as clouds anymore. I made it originally as clouds, but from that moment on, I couldn't see it as just clouds anymore. I saw it as smoke and clouds. And I thought that was so interesting because I didn't even think of that. And sometimes like children's minds, like you just, Picasso said children are the best artists. And because they don't have this box that they put themselves in that sometimes we do when we get older. And so I thought that was a genius idea. I was like, oh my goodness. So I added a train in the back, right dead center in the middle there, because I wanted the viewer to have the same experience of questioning whether it should be smoke or clouds. And I titled the painting Illegitimately Trained and Trained. And it's just a play on obviously the train that I have in there, but also as artwork, as artists and, as writers as well, like sometimes society doesn't view our craft as legitimate. And so that's why I called it Illegitimately Trained.
Illegitimately trained. The cotton balls are real and the paint. The questions are real and the light. The small and far away loom as large as the not now but once real yellow, orange, blue sunset or sunrise, populated by not clouds but smoke, not puffs but cotton. The cotton balls are real and the lines travel someplace across landscape you've been to in real time or before time or now. Never mind. The bright lines of light shine inside, pool the eyes with swirl that obstructs the tracks, traveled once upon a time to some place not dream, right? At least you'll agree the cotton balls are real and the paint, the questions are real and the light, and someone you and not you opened the view to time moving while you and not you waited on a small painted chair and agreed the cotton balls are real and the paint. The lines line up to something purchased at Rite Aid and Lowe's before the artist pulled out of an open bag, pried out of a sealed can, a train, the tracks, a sky, smoke. You, really, come see, the cotton balls are real and the paint. And then here are some close-ups. And you'll see there are words and phrases woven throughout this one as well. I think I won't read this one just because for the sake of time, but here's Sun on South Street, which is again a pantoum. And some close-ups of that. Annalie, do you want to talk about this one briefly, and then I'll read this one?
Just a little bit. I talked earlier about how, I do have different pathways. I use a lot of arrows because that takes you to somewhere else. So do doors, so do windows, and so do ladders. So that's why I put ladders in here. A little bit about the process. All these kind of squiggly marks that you're seeing, I actually filled up condiment bottles with paint and drew on the water. So I really wanted the water to kind of have this like chaotic feeling to it. So that's kind of what you're seeing here.
Arc. And I wanted to create that momentum too with the way the line breaks are. Ladders to below to, above to, turn off the faucet to, weeping to, turn on the spigot to, here now to, unleash the liquid to, water to, weary to, whiplash to, swirl in the iris of horizon to, witness the wet of windswept, to hide in the eye of reject, to float in the drowning of hopeless, to breathe in the rattling of broken, to gasp with the mouth of ocean, to curl with the swish of sudden, to gulp with the whir of twisters, to swallow with the salt of senseless, to blur with the vision of serpents, to spew with the sputum of whales, to seek with the regurgitation of Jonah, to sink in the rise of remorse, to know with the blind eye of Noah, to soar in the dry sky with dove, to circle the submersion of world, to flutter and hover, to dive and discover, to finally land. And again, some close-up images. I won't read this on, but Annalie, do you want to talk for a moment about this painting?
Yeah, this painting is actually
huge.
It's huge. It's made on a drop cloth. So it was my COVID project. But basically this painting, it's a painting that has a lot of very vivid colors. There's a lot going on in this piece. And I have some words that I kind of wove through, or I like to call them instructions, on how to view the piece. And so keep in mind the piece is massive, bright colors. And at the same time, I made this big piece for you to look at, but at the same time, I'm telling you in the top left, you see, don't look. So don't look up, here, down, where, there, nowhere. On the sun or moon, whatever you want it to be, I have, why would I lie to you? Why would I tell you the truth? And these are things that I'm really contradicting myself here, because I made this big painting, but I'm telling you not to look at it. And then I'm saying, why would I lie to you? Why would you trust me? So I'm contradicting myself multiple times. So you're going back and forth saying, should I look at this painting? And then you're saying, why would I trust you? Well, maybe I shouldn't trust you. Maybe I shouldn't trust the artist. Maybe I shouldn't look at it. And then I'm saying, why would I lie to you? So maybe that means look at it again. This is my Alice in Wonderland. These are my worlds that I make up in my head. This is what I see. And so what I see is what I paint.
And then here you can get a sense of how large it is. And this,
yeah, I love that reaction there.
Yeah, they got to put up in the museum that opened last night. The exhibit opened last night, so it was really nice to see it shown in the museum. and some close-ups of this. And then I did the Pantoum style again with italicized phrases that were in the paintings. I think I'm going to skip this for the sake of time. Should we end with this one, Annalie?
Yeah.
Because I want to leave enough time for Sandy, of course.
Yeah, let's end with
star.
this one.
Okay, why don't you tell the story and then I'll.
Yeah, so I think this is one of my favorite stories about my pieces because I feel like a lot of people can relate to this or have had a very similar experience or witnessed this experience and know exactly what I'm trying to say here. So this painting is called The Letter E, and it was based on a small experience that I had when I was in college. I was working part-time at a daycare, just kind of a floater, just helping out in the mornings. And the classroom I was in at the time had about 5 to 6 year olds was the age group. And they were learning, that day was the day to learn the letter E. And so they had different stations set up. And I was at one of the stations, and my job was just kind of, show the kids how to write the E for like 5 minutes. And then they'd switch stations. I get the new kids, and, we just go around until they kind of got the concept. And so this group of kids sat down at the table with me, and I started showing them the letter E. And then it was kind of at the time where the time was up. We learned the letter, and we were getting ready to switch stations. So I was, they were getting ready to move on. I was getting ready to get new kids. And one of the girls, who was probably about 6, looked at me and said, just randomly, she said, "How do you spell narwhal?" And I thought I laughed because it was just so random. But also at the same time, I thought it was really awesome because in my experience, with kids at that age, they don't really ask a lot how to spell things. They might ask what things mean, but spelling, that kind of comes a little later. So I was kind of surprised that she asked me that. And I was also surprised she knew what a narwhal was. And so I answered her, and I started spelling. I was like, N-A-R. And then at that time, the teacher who was in charge came by, noticed that I wasn't talking about the letter E, and reprimanded both me and the child for that. And so this painting is really about asking questions. And I'm like, I'm the teacher. The student is asking a question. We're in a school, but yet I'm not allowed to answer the question. What does this teach the student about being curious in the future about answering questions? She had a brilliant question, asking how to spell something at 5 or 6 years old. That's awesome. Any teacher should be like overjoyed to hear that, but instead she was put down for that. So this to me is all about learning and education. And you'll kind of notice it looks like the E is kind of going down the drain a little bit. So I think my mom really, one of my favorite poems that she wrote is this one, because I think she really captured what I was trying to say.
The letter E. Don't distract me with questions, those extraneous detours that topple learning. E and only E is today's lesson. The enemy is schedules, is curiosity, omissions necessary for well-paced delivery. We yearn for no distractions. Don't ask me questions, time-wasting, silly digressions of how and why. Pay attention. Our concern is E and only E. Today's lesson is letter 5. Your inquisitive obsessions are enemies of order. Don't ruin class by distracting me with questions. Creativity's the one transgression I won't allow. Sit still, don't squirm. E and only E is today's lesson. Up next, the letter F, natural progression of learning. Quiet, it's not your turn to talk. Don't distract me with questions. E and only E is today's lesson. And then here's just some close-ups of that. And we'll stop there and hand it over to Sandy. Thanks very much.
Well, I think Kim's going to jump in now, actually.
Yes, I am. I'm astounded and sucked into the vortex of E. That is an amazing story and painting to end on, so brilliant. And as someone who spent 30 years in education, I cringe when I hear those stories. I know them so well. education should be about the, celebration of curiosity, much as you two demonstrate from your amazing collaboration. The curiosity as you pursue your paintings and the curiosity as you pursue your poetry. Thank you both so much for sharing with us today. As you can see from the comments in the chat, everyone was mesmerized and delighted, and we're so grateful for your sharing today. And thank you, and everyone, we're going to turn to our dear and beloved Sandy Yannone, and I have the honor of reading her biography today and introducing her, which is both formal and a personal statement from me as her friend for many decades. Sandra Yannone's debut collection, Boats for Women, was published by Salmon Poetry in Ireland in 2019, and her second collection of poetry, The Glass Studio, was published in February of this year. Her poetry and book reviews have appeared in Ploughshares, Poetry Ireland Review, Lambda Literary Review, and numerous others. Since March 2020, she has hosted this weekly reading series, the fabulous Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, on Zoom via Facebook, as we all know and deeply value. She also co-curates and hosts the West East Bicoastal Poets of the Pandemic reading series, which is terrific, and I hope you'll stop in and visit with them when they do their readings. Sandy is a tireless champion of poets and poetry, a self-professed Titaniac, a seeker and peddler of eclectic treasures, a lover of corgis, a connoisseur of seafood chowder, and for many who know and love her, a living vortex of joy. And it is one of the great gifts in my life to call her my friend. Sandy, take us away.
Wow, thank you, Kim. I'm bubbling with joy after your introduction, thinking about, all the time that we've just spent in Ireland together. And I am just so like overwhelmed in the like most amazing way from what I just witnessed from Marjorie and Anna. Like I don't know how I'm gonna be able to come out of the paintings, frankly, and read my poetry. And I want to also, of course, just like honor the depth of the poetry that we also heard from Karen and Neil. What an I want to kind of stop the program right now. But I won't. In the spirit of what Marjorie and Anna were doing, we had initially we thought we were casting this particular program today about collaboration. And I felt in some ways I was going to be the odd poet out, only in that the book, The Glass Studio, is a response in some ways to my dead father as a glass artist. And in that regard, I'm collaborating, with his memory and the legacy of the work that he's left behind in my memory. The book is and contains all the poems have the word glass in them, and some of you've heard me talk about this before. So I'm going to read 5 or 6 poems. We might go just a little over, folks. If I hope you'll be able to indulge that, and it's okay if you can't. And I'm going to start with one of the 4 title poems. The Glass Studio, August 12th, 2005. The hired boys on their bicycles park in front of the studio, disguised as a 2-story house. My father is paying them to break down the sheetrock on the 2nd floor. They pitch the walls, flat like full sheets of stained glass out the windows. From my parents' bedroom window next door, I watch the boys exit out the front door and heave wall after wall into the dumpster on the front lawn. When they reach the panels with our autographs and logos of late 1970s rock bands drawn with colored Sharpies, the hired boys laugh their nervous teenage laughs because they don't quite know the hands or all the bands or all the materials surrounding them. Crates packed with sheets of glass, soldering irons, spools of lead fluxes and patinas, plaster molds and metal jigs hanging from the ceiling like a torture chamber. Once upon a time, I sat high on a yellow chrome stool by the window across from my parents' bedroom, soldering the seams where copper foiled pieces meet together with beads of lead, mimicking the sweat dripping down my face, traveling the veins in my arms. I didn't mind. I placed my focus on the creation of the thing of glass. Occasionally, a sea breeze would drift through the screen, remind me of the world outside, and that in a few hours I would be back on the raw glass, sandy beach, letting the salt and sand obliterate the sweat and the double life I led upstairs and down, at home and at school, at work and at play. Everything kept at arm's length to create all that superfluous gilded light. Thank you. Well, it is Mother's Day, and I want to honor my mom by, who of course is sitting right behind me. And I asked her, was there any particular poem you would like to hear today? And she chose this poem, which is a rather, I don't know, it's a rather fun poem to read. And the reason that she wanted to really hear this is because she felt like it evoked her father and also, memories of her growing up in Gloucester, Massachusetts. This is called Lobsters. Every summer, against my wishes, my grandfather escorted me to a lobster shack on Bearskin Neck in Rockport, Massachusetts. Heaped in slimy, perspiring tanks, the lobsters lumbered over each other for the best position in the dank water, as if trying to break each other's backs. My grandfather held my hand tightly. We were the only living things not drenched in seawater. Men in slick plastic overalls, the color of seaweed, jawed loud orders over my head. In the tanks, the lobsters fought too. At eye level, I saw them up close, the gladiator claws, the antennae snapped off, bewildered, on the floor of the tanks, like swords separated from their hands. The less agile lobsters, I assumed, dead or dying, buried at the bottom. Some hampered by a single claw lost to a battle somewhere at sea. I didn't want to think this happened here in the tanks, in the cramped, chilly shack on a hot July day when the men risked their hands to grab one of the ugly things for someone's dinner. How anyone could eat one, I never understood. At the Museum of Northwest Art, the glass lobster resides pristine, blown, deep ruby red, barnacled in cobalt, the ink black beaded eyes, the wide segments of tail, ready to shuffle like shiny new cards. And the claws, those robust claws. I want to break into the polished glass case and crack them open to taste their sumptuous New England meat. But it is all wrong. My grandfather, now dead 30 years, my life transposed to the Pacific Northwest. The Atlantic glass lobster, singular, out of water, triumphant, under glass. I will just say about that poem that I feel like I was thinking a lot about what Elizabeth Bishop did in The Fish, which is not to say that I was able to do that in the Lobsters poem, but I'm pretty sure that was an inspiration for me. So shout out to Elizabeth Bishop. Well, I'm going to read just three more, and I want to read this poem in particular because of Neil and of Karen's necessity for us to speak out about what's happening. And also, I'm reminded about what Neil said, which is, it's very important that the Palestinians write their own narratives, their own poems. This poem is a sestina called Let Me Stand Alone, and it takes its title from the posthumously published Let Me Stand Alone, the journals of Rachel Corrie, which was published in 2009. Rachel was a student at the Evergreen State College where I taught, and where I was when she was killed. And this poem is largely about that experience and casting us into the present. In addition to being a member of Parliament, for Fermanagh and South Tyrone, Bobby Sands, who's mentioned in the poem, 1954 to 1981, was a member of the Provisional Irish Republican Army, the IRA. He died from starvation while on hunger strike in HM Prison Maze, County Down, Northern Ireland, on May 5th, 1981. This is Let No One Stand Alone for Rachel Corrie, 1979 to 2003. The day I reconnected with evil again, driving south on I-5 to escape my own mini-series of headlines in Bellingham, the news from Rafa broke, horrific, like all history emerging, that she had died, clutching fistfuls of dirt that day when she stood her ground alone. Bulldozer, an American college girl, a standoff, March 16th, 2003, and NPR reporting that evil had prevailed in not so many spoken words. Outside of Everett, I clutched the steering wheel and the story's every word harder than a car owner should, my knuckles turning whiter than history recorded, each mile driven bringing news of worse news as Western Washington blurred by. A Caterpillar D9R, now news, conflicting reports, as the bulldozer operator keeps standing by his story that he never saw her, like all of history buried, a corpse shouldering its dirty shot glasses of evil, like everything that history swallows and disowns to keep its truth underground, soiled. All these clutch plays for convenient blindness, the way a small girl might clutch a stolen chocolate bar in her not so naive fist. The news that Sunday afternoon, so disorienting that I couldn't own it over all these years. And for days after, everyone I knew stood shell-shocked on the campus bricks, mourning that something so evil could befall an Olympia family community in spring. We became history, unforgettable, untethered, in those distorted, budding days. And history would repeat weeks later when a friend, originally from Belfast, clutched his chair's armrests, like the sides of a lifeboat to survive evil's swells just hours after speaking at her memorial, trying to keep the 1980s news from Belfast at bay, so as not to confuse everything he stood for from everything crumbling beneath Rachel's own sure feet. but he couldn't distinguish his own grief over losing Bobby Sand's sister, whom he loved, from this new history still fresh in his mind like butchered meat. He couldn't stand anything now resembling the girlish present. And clutching his mug handle, I witnessed a man unraveled by more than news, while we drank strong Irish tea, his heart having been evil's good next door neighbor for far too long. He stood up, alone, clutching his own singular history, weeping, wishing, like me, that Rachel had made her story farther away from the news and from that man-made blade of evil. I wrote that poem after being inspired by Kevin Higgins, a poet, a salmon poet who passed away last year, and he had asked me to be on a program. I had not wanted to write that poem, but I knew I needed to write a poem about that experience at some point. And his invitation, gave me the invitation to finally sit down and write it. Well, in the interest of time, and everyone's been so generous today, let me just read these final two poems. They're the last two poems in the book. And after a poem like that, I do like to try to come back to something that can raise us a little bit. Well, nothing like the Partridge Family to do that. So this is David Cassidy writes me a fan letter from the great painted bus beyond. From the pages of all those Tiger Beat magazines you purchased with your allowance, I became more like sugar with each poster you pulled from the centerfold staples. I never liked that my crotch was always pinned to the crease, that girls tugged at my sleeves, ripped off my clothes, and shredded what was left of me at my concerts. I was hoping to be a firefly that feasted on night flowers, leaving my scent behind with my original songs, the ones no one heard over the din of those pop hits that ABC's money moguls shoveled into my mouth. During boxed lunches on the set, I had to sign thousands of postcards to girls I'd never met. I was drowning Sandy in the fountain of teen idol fame, and I didn't know how to swim. Who does in that kind of water? So I vanished into those cheap newsprint pages of 16 magazine. I became a paper ghost, and only the drugs and sex told me that I was alive. What can I say? Why am I risking this from the great painted bus beyond to share with you? I think you know better than the lyrics to I Think I Love You. Every poem is a spotlight that shines the light back into your eyes. You need to keep them open to honest desires. Don't get caught beneath the undertow of the trapdoor's weight. Come on, you know how to escape, to get happy. You almost do it every day, except it's like your shadow side. You never let yourself fully embrace the miracle of you. I sang all those songs on those albums that I know you still sing when you are alone or driving with your sister in her van. I know you gave a private concert to Tara Hardy in your living room, that you have two microphones at the ready to practice when you feel inspired by songs you wore down the needles in your preteen bedroom to hear over and over. I wasn't ready for everything that came next after the gold records and the show's opening credits dressed in mod. I should have shaken off that Partridge Family tree sooner. But this isn't my ending, Sandy. This is your beginning. So come on, stay happy. Swallow my songs, my prayers for that girl long ago who loved me as no one could. Retire all those faded fan magazines. You know you are happier when you are unlocked, unleashed from inside the glass house where you've been waiting your whole ludicrous life to sing. And I'll just mention while I have you all here, and before I read my last poem, thank you. The cover to the book is a little bit dressed in mod. It's the actual font from the Partridge Family show. It's called Calligraphia with a K. And thank you to Salmon Poetry's Siobhan Hudson, Yannone, and my editor, Jesse Lendenny, for helping put this book in the world. It's my dad's artwork, a piece of my dad's artwork that's on the cover. So, and this is the final poem, another title poem called The Glass Studio. And thanks so much for listening. And oh my gosh, thanks everybody. Neil and Karen, Marjorie, Anna, what a reading. The Glass Studio. Glass eyes, glass flowers, glass attics and floors. Everything is made of glass. Glass hands on display reaching for the glass ceiling at the department store. Glass water from the glass water tower in glassy New York City. Glass watch face, glass clock face, and sometimes even the glass minute and second hands. The glass ocean with glass crustaceans and starfish, the ocean's beach glass grumbling to shore to become sand once again. Up the glass staircase, the glass stars blink their luminosity. Glass water in water glasses, glass teeth and tongue provoke the glass heart with its percussive glass beat. A glass voice breaks the glass bottom boat, the glass oar, propeller, and rudder to the rescue. Glass confections and glass cakes behind glass. Glass fixtures of all shapes and sizes hanging from glass ceilings in the glass house, but we won't go there again, won't ask for a glass bottle return from a long abandoned glass deposit. No glass handouts or handshakes here in this glassy poem. I use a glass pen to scribe in glass ink on a sheet of paper, glass thin, like my father used to do in the glass studio. I still see his black Sharpie markings eroding on the glass. I grip the glass writing implement much as I would the glass cutter to score sheets of glass in the studio. And now the glass sun breaks open behind the glass lighthouse, while off in the glassy distance, the glass studio waits for an opening with a glass key. The glass stoplight turns only to green. In the glass morning, all the glass rules break all our glass histories through the glass centuries. Hour after glass hour, the sand in the hourglass keeps immaculate glass time in every glass town and city as the glass birds croon their glassy bird songs, their fragile glass wings flapping in the glass wind. Now go home to your glass house and unpack every glass mirror you've forever hoped to break. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you to our incredible readers today. Thanks for staying a little extra today, my friends out there, wherever you are in all of your glassy time zones. Well, we have just had an incredibly immaculate reading today here on our new book showcase and Cultivating Voices live poetry. We began at the top of the hour with Neil Young, Karen Warinsky, Marjorie Maddox, and Anna Lee Hafer. I'm never ever going to forget the confluence of these voices today. Would you all unmute and show your appreciation with your voices and your hoopla?
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo!
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Wonderful
It
reading.
was great.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
Bravo, setting the sail for peace and imagination.
It is peace and imagination. I love that. You
Yeah. Peace and imagination.
should show. Okay. Um, well, I want to encourage you all to join us next week. Oh my gosh, my friends. We will have, we are deviating slightly from our normal wild card open mic on the third Sunday and returning to a program that we aired on May 16th, 2021, when we had during this month, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, when we showcased the poetry and conversation across 3 generations between Mary Owishi, Tanya Kohong, and Janice Miratakani. Janice Miratakani remains, I was going to say she remains a pillar of poetry and activism. And she was a trailblazer of her time as an Asian American poet. And she was the second poet laureate of San Francisco. She passed away only 2 months after our program, and we did not know that she was ill. I'll be telling the story, of course, next time. This program next week is showcasing a book that was brought out this past year that has brought 2 of her collections, Awake in the River and Shedding Silence, back into print from the classic Asian American literature series at the University of Washington. We will be joined with the curator of that series, Sean Wong, along with Mary Owishi, Tanya Kohong, and Janice Miratakani's daughter will be with us, reading poems from those 2 collections. I literally am sitting here with chills telling you that this will be the program next week. It will be a program to remember, as the original was a program to remember. And of course, we'll also show clips of Janice from that day, reading her own work. I hope you will join us next Sunday. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, the hours that are ahead of you. And thank you so very much for joining us today on this special collaboration edition. The poets that we heard from today, we saw the direct collaboration between Marjorie and Anna, but Karen and Neil in their work are collaborating with others all the time as well. And we all truly are, actually, when we are cultivating our voices and sharing them together. So I hope you'll join us next week and be looking ahead to our last month before we take our hiatus in June. With a slight program note, I want to give just this little shout out for tonight on the Rattlecast with Tim Green. I have to do this. 2 people I absolutely adore who are collaborators in writing together are going to be on the Rattlecast with Tim Green at 8 p.m. tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern time. That is, and they've both been on the program, Julie Marie Wade and Denise DeHamo. It's going to be an amazing, amazing Rattlecast tonight. So keep the poetry going today. Keep the poetry going always. Take very good care of yourselves this upcoming week. If you're in Connecticut and happen to want to come down to Old Saybrook, I'll be reading at the Acton Public Library, launching the Glass Studio in the town where the Glass Studio exists. So if you're around, please do come out. Check my Facebook page out. Well, as I said, take very good care of yourselves this week and take extremely good care of your beloveds. And wow, look what happens when we keep writing for ourselves and together, always. Well, I'm Sandy Yannone here, Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, with exquisite thanks and gratitude to all of you, and especially Kim Ports Parsons, thank you for that heart on cue. Right back at you, sister. And Don Krieger, we'll see you next Sunday. Be well, everyone.